Three, two, one.
All right, here we are, and welcome to the realm, property realm. That is a bit like Bond, James Bond, isn't it? And this is our brand new show, all about property on Tuesdays, lunchtime. So really, we're going to kick the week off because we all know that no one works on a Monday. So by lunchtime Tuesday, us Australians meander back to the workforce and decide that it's time to have lunch, and maybe we'll do something on Tuesday afternoon after we have a snack. So grab your snack, grab a drink, and sit down and chat to us now. And this is a bit of a different format we've got happening here. I have with me Co and Remo today because we've been having a bit of an argument in our office, and we thought the only way that we can sort this out is online in front of everyone, Kardashian style, because that's what you do nowadays. And of course, the argument is, boys, feel free to chime in anytime you want because don't be shy. You sure as heck haven't been offline. Is that what is the best way to go about securing your future if you only had 10 years to do something in property? So most of your plans with property is 10 to 20 years plus, all that sort of stuff, and you buy and never sell and all that. But if you only had 10 years and you had to really condense it, what would be the absolute best thing to do to make sure that you never had to do anything again after that 10-year period? So I'm going to throw over to Co right now, and he can sort of take us through the options that we've got and a few of the arguments we've got. And I'm sure Remo, being an import, let's say, we've got South Africa versus New Zealand versus Australia here today on the screen. So let's just see how that turns out. So Co, over to you, mate.
Love it, Scott. So I know this is a common situation, and it's something that I've gone through myself. And I'm very interested to hear both of your perspectives in terms of whether it's a better option to acquire a number of properties over time over that 10-year period. We hear a lot of investors talking about trying to acquire 10 properties over 10 years. I myself have been through those seminars, webinars, and have been sold on that idea. Prior to learning anything about property development, that I thought that was the only strategy, and I trust for many of the listeners out there, that might be some of the thoughts that you're thinking, and for some who may be already involved in the development space are probably focusing on that strategy. But for those who are actively looking for a solution as to how to gain financial security over a period of 10 years, what is the best way? I mean, for me, when I had a full-time job and had consistent income, that seemed like acquiring a number of properties was a strategy for me. Obviously, from moving from a steady income to business, my situation changed, and it seemed like that strategy wouldn't apply for me, and the development strategy was more the way to go, using some equity. Let's start with you, Scott. What are some of your thoughts?
Okay, well, look, great question, Co. Look, this hasn't occurred to me before, of course, except it has, and it's a big topic for people, right? I mean, this is the whole reason why we thought we'd kick off this show on this topic, because if you ever put any thought into property investing, is there anything other than buy and hold? Well, the simple answer is yes. But I'm going to argue today that buy and hold still has a pretty strong place in a portfolio, and the reason is because, to me, buy and hold, you capture a long-term value uplift as opposed to a transactional value of, say, a duplex or development, which is obviously substantially more than if we just buy and hold, right, at over a period of time. If you did lots of those things, then maybe it would add up more than buy and hold. But for the people that don't really want to have much to do with things, then I still think buy and hold has a place, albeit it does depend on your personal circumstance. And look, I will say, let's have a look here. Where is it? Why stop at 10 properties? Because you can just do 130 properties, right, in 3.5 years. So we're talking about 10 properties in 10 years, but realistically, anyone can go and do 130 properties in 3.5 years because there's a book written about it, and it must be really easy.
All right. Well,
Wow. Can I have that book?
So Remo, maybe share a little bit about your thoughts in terms of property development and what might be your suggestion for investors.
Look, I have to agree with Scotty on some level. Just for the record, if this is anything like Australia, South Africa, New Zealand World Cup, I'm going to win, right? Anyway, I have to agree with Scotty. Yes, there is some merit in the buy and hold strategy. My question is, though, how many average Australians on, say, $150,000 to $250,000 a year income can actually go out and afford to buy 10 properties over 10 years and hold that? So my argument is, it's not about owning it, and it is about owning it, but it's about how you get to achieve that point in your life where you can get to go and buy 10 properties and sit on them long term. Make sense?
Yeah, well, yeah, look, it does. And look, I mean, I don't want to get into the details of who can afford to buy 10 properties and who can't, Remo, because I mean, as if that's part of, a foundation of a plan, right? I mean, you just can do it. I mean, we should all click our fingers and we should have had our 10 properties by July last year, because even if we had 10 $500,000 properties, now we'd have 10 $750,000 properties, and I've just made $2.5 million in a year. But in reality, what you're saying is correct. That's not what happens, right? Firstly, you don't buy them all at the same time. Secondly, how do you buy them? Like having 10 properties is a lofty goal, and it's not a silly goal, but why don't we cost it out, right? So even if we bought $500,000 properties, we're talking about, like if you didn't want lender's mortgage insurance, you're talking about $100,000 in deposit, cash or equity for the deposit, plus stamps because the investment, plus other costs, right? So you're going to be sitting at 125 plus per property, right? So 10 properties right away is 1.25 million if you went and did it. And yes, you might be able to do one. Say you did your first one in June last year, and then you could possibly buy your second one in June this year because there's been so much uplift in the market. And if you look back at property over time, property can always look like it has a linear growth, but because you can divide it, right? Oh, it grew 10% in 3 years, so it was 3.3% a year, but that's not what happens in reality, right? In reality, it does 0, 0, minus 3, 0, plus 3, plus 25, right?
Yeah.
And so when do you choose that? So when you're building a plan, you've got to have that asset base as a foundation, but you've got to cost in, is it possible for you to do your 10 properties in 10 years?
Okay, so sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, go for it.
Yeah, Scott, you mentioned in some of the discussions we've had previously that with property investment, it has the advantage of time, meaning if the market stuffs up over time, the corrections will take over and it can make up for your mistakes. Remo, maybe share your insight in terms of property development on maybe its advantages over a period of time, as opposed to property investment over time having that advantage of corrections over time.
Okay, cool. So let's look at the facts, right? If you go and buy 10 properties over 10 years, your outlay on a $500,000 property without LMI is going to be over $1 million. Your debt is going to be $4.5 million. It's great if the property market continues to grow at the current rate that it's growing at the moment, which we know it's not going to. We're going to get to a point where we're going to have a market slowdown, slight correction. Is property going to come down substantially? Definitely not. I don't think that. I don't support that. I don't support that thought. However, let's say the market slows down and we've got a we've got a supply and demand issue where we've got too much in supply and too less of a demand. You've got 10 properties, $4.5 million of debt, and let's say 5 of those properties are not being rented out. What's your exposure to risk when you're placed in that position, right? The banks are not going to say, oh, it's okay, we're going to waive your mortgage payment for 6 months while you get yourself back on your feet. So before you know it, just like that, if the market changes, slows down, and there's any correction, within as little as a few months, 2 or 3 or 4 months, you can find yourself liquidating half your assets quicker than you can say hi. So that's my argument with buying and holding. So It's about the strategy that you utilize to get there. If you can accumulate property through property development, so you build 10, keep 1, sell 9, that's a very different strategy. Your exposure to risk within property development is somewhat lesser in some way, shape, or form as well. So, mate, I'm always pro property development. It's not only just because it's what I do and what we do for a living. Obviously, we do a lot of other stuff as well, but it's about setting up your fundamentals or your base to make sure that you can sustain, buying 10 properties over 10 years. So it's not so much the end goal of how to, that's what I want to do. It's about how you get there. And I think property development, is the way to get there. If you're earning 25% on $100,000 over a 12-month period, it's $125,000, right? Now, that's to say if you're partnering with someone in a property development, that's a way to generate wealth, financial wealth, in the form of fiat funds in your account, so you can utilize those funds to obviously accumulate more wealth. If you actually go out and develop your own property where you're buying, let's something simple, for the average Australian, they can go out and do this. They go out, they buy a block of land for 500,000, they build a duplex lot, right? Right now, where I'm living, a duplex lot sells for $1.1, $1.2 million. They would have paid $600,000 to buy and build a duplex lot on that land. They sell one, live in the other one, or rent the other one out. They get to keep one and sell off one. That's a surefire way to actually buy, develop, build, sell one, and keep one, and actually build that portfolio. And obviously, you can do that on a much bigger scale. The more you keep repeating that process, the more you're going to be able to accumulate wealth. Then you get into the bigger picture where you can start pulling equity out and actually utilizing that equity to then build a much bigger portfolio. That's the safe way, in my opinion. Obviously, some other people might have a different opinion. Scotty.
Yeah, so Remo, it seems like from what you're sharing, it's the benefits of property development is, on one hand, you get the cash uplift per annum if you're partnering with property developers, and also utilizing that strategy to acquire property at the same time. So, Scott, maybe touch on how that differs, because we hear from a lot of property experts how they are selling, how others can acquire 10 properties in 10 years, as an example, or a number of properties in a number of years, but maybe some that often talk about the development aspect of how they're acquiring it themselves. For the average Australian, and if they're looking to gain or secure their financial future, what would you advise them, as opposed to what to look out for when purely looking at a buy and hold strategy?
Yeah, okay. Well, let's put some clarity around a couple of furphies here. In that, you often hear that the top 80% richest people, make their money in real estate and all this sort of stuff. That's a load of crap. They park their money in real estate, and they've made it through business or the business of property. Okay, which is very different from what people think they have actually done, which is just buying property and making their wealth that way. That's not what happens. Property is a fantastic place to park your wealth. It is not a fantastic place to make wealth as a buy and hold. Now, I could never be on a debating team at school, because if I thought a certain way, there's no way I'm going to debate the other way. And it's exactly the same as this now. We said we'd do half the show as like a little mini debate thing, because at the end of the day, I don't believe that buy and hold is the only way forward. And I absolutely believe that someone should have an individual designed portfolio for their needs and their goals. And you are absolutely crazy if you want to achieve something in a set time frame and you try and use buy and hold to do it. That's it. If that's the only thing you use, you're gonna miss the mark. What you absolutely need to do is have buy and hold as part of your strategy. And you need to have an active and a passive investment strategy. And this is where the whole development or active capital transactions, which is called ACT, which is what we call them, is what you need to do, right? And which is what Remo's talking about. You know, those duplexes and the partnering with developments or doing developments or whatever. That's those active capital transactions. You're getting your original capital and you make it active. And then out of those profits, you got two choices. You got three choices, right? You can spend it, you can pay down your debt, or you can reinvest it. And that reinvesting can be in another active capital transaction, but generally speaking, that reinvesting would go into a buy and hold property. So do you see what I'm talking about when those wealthy people have made money out of business or the business of property, which is what we're talking about here? Transactions is the business of property. Then you take those profits and you park them in a buy and hold. Okay? And so that's, or pay down your personal debt, which is the same thing as parking a buy and hold. Right? So 100% that's my belief, is that you need both, and that if you can only do one and you've only got enough and you want that control, well then you do a buy and hold. But if you want to further and you've got one or two properties behind you and you want to expand your base quickly, then buying and holding is not going to do that for you.
Can you touch on, or maybe Remo, you can touch on some of this, but what are some of the consequences of purely relying on buy and hold and not actively pursuing active strategies like partnering in property developments?
Well, as Scotty just said, you don't have an active strategy. So you're completely reliant on the current market and what it's doing. So if the market goes down, so does your asset portfolio wealth go down. Because if something does happen and the property market does go through a correction or market slowdown, property comes down slightly, well, you've got all your eggs in one basket. You're not diversifying, utilizing different strategies to create wealth. Nobody that I know, nobody that I've read about, nobody that I've heard of have actually created wealth through just having one strategy. And I don't think that parking your funds in a property is a strategy. It's not. You know, it's not an active strategy. It's not going to create. Well, unless your goals are small and you just want to have, one or two properties, and that's what you want to achieve, and you want to pay it off over 20 or 30 years, and you can live off $2,500 a month income, or $5,000 once they paid off. But again, we're talking about a 10-year strategy. We're not talking about a 25 to 30-year strategy here. So is that going to work? No. It doesn't make sense to me how you can go and purchase and pay off your debt and generate a passive income, positively geared income from that property in 10 years. I mean, it just makes no sense.
I think that's an important...
sorry, Sio, you're right.
Yeah, no, I was just saying that I think that's an important part when he talks about income for a lot of investors that are looking to secure their financial future. They're looking for passive income strategies and to rely on that or replace their income. For a lot of investors, having a change in income in their personal circumstances along the way, obviously the strategies may need to adjust. Maybe you can touch on that, Scotty.
Yeah, well, okay, so I'd like to do that. But one of the things I really want to mention as a big risk on a buy and hold, and it's something we discuss with every client when they go and do it, which is why the strategy I talked about before works so well, is that generally speaking, if you go through a buy and hold strategy and you've either scraped together a deposit or you've taken, a refinance of your principal place of residence and you bought a second property, which is your first investment property, right? And then say that property goes up and then you're going to do it again. Well, besides getting into the whole serviceability thing with banks and what have you, you're actually operating on 100% debt. Okay, that's probably something that and I hate debt. It's an unfortunately necessary thing for what we do. But if you've got your principal place of residence and it's worth 500 grand and you've got a $200,000 loan on it, and you go and get it revalued. You revalue to pull some equity out, right? And so you pull out 100K, call it, to buy another $500,000 property. So you've pulled out 100,000 off your own home, which is tax deductible, right? The interest and all that, because used for investment purposes. And then you put it on a $500,000 property. So there's your 20% deposit. So the bank will give you the 400,000 or the 80% balance, right, for your investment property. Well, that investment property is 100% lending. Now, that's fine from a tax perspective, but your net position has changed from a $300,000 net value, right, to what? Well, it's now 200,000, right? Because you've bought another property and you've shifted some money around, and so your risk increases. Okay, so your risk is a two-edged sword. So the risk of the property dropping, right, is now like you can make some real damage to yourself. Or if the market goes up, then your position in the market is across two properties, not one. So you're making more money, right? And that's what everyone thinks is going to happen. And fine, most of the time that's what happens. My point is that you're going to do that for the second property and the third property and the fourth property. Every time you're doing that, you're refinancing, you're pulling out. You're not actually realizing any gain until you sell a property. Okay? And that's what we've got to remember here, that when you refinance, you're taking on debt, right? You're swapping a position of that property's value for some more debt, and away you go. But you're not realizing any gain. If you have another strategy where you do something active and you're in and you're out, right, in 12, 18, 24 months, and then you're in and then you're out, and you're always assessing, and you realize those profits, and then you can choose to reinvest them elsewhere, right? Well, that's what you always are in control. You're always in control, and you don't have that debt. So it would be much better off for you to build your deposits for your investment properties out of real cash than equity. I think we could all agree on that, right? That's a much more balanced position to be in. And if you can do that, you need to do that through using your capital in an active way.
Yeah.
So from what you've shared, Scotty, with the buy and hold strategy, some of the things to look out for the listeners here is noticing that you're relying on a 100% debt if that's the only strategy that you're using to acquire more properties by reinvesting your equity. The other problems is that it's reliant on serviceability. You have a lot of risk involved when and if the property drops, but in most cases, properties will gain, but people don't look at the potential of where property values might drop. And again, they're not realizing their gains or their capital until they sell. Obviously, there's tax implications and things once
Sure.
they do sell. But the benefits of using active strategies like property developments is that number one, not only they get to realize that capital quicker, like you've mentioned, Remo, anywhere from above 25% per annum, and using those strategies to park it in buy and hold strategies, that overall means that number one, you're in a bit more control. You get to reevaluate your gains and seeing where you're at, and you have a lot more control. What other benefits are there to using these active strategies, Remo?
Other benefits. Well, you're not exposed to a substantial amount of debt. When you come and transact, or when you're transacting in a property development project with a developer, obviously you've got to do your homework and research the developer and make sure they know what they're doing, right? So, don't just go and park your money with anybody. Do the research. But your funds are typically in and out of a project within 12 to 18 months, depending on the project itself. So your level of debt, your level of risk, is substantially lower. I guess one of the big questions, or one of the big things that people might be thinking as well is, well, if I go and buy an investment property, they're in full control of that investment property. It's their asset; they can touch it, feel it, go around, fix it up. When you're parking $100,000 with a developer, you're not in as much control. And a lot of people might see that as a risk. I guess then it comes down to, how do I manage that risk? How do I keep control of my funds? How do I get access to see how those funds are being spent? You know what I mean? I've seen this firsthand with developers in the past where they do their own thing. Clients get updated quarterly. They don't really get any information on anything. When the clients start asking questions, it's more just coming up with excuses. There's no real hard, fast facts about exactly what's going on. So if you're going to partner with a developer, make sure that you get access to hard, fast facts. Make sure that you get access to the developer themselves, their project managers, their team. It's just, you can get the same sort of security and trust within a developer should you build that relationship with them and choose the right developer to partner with, as you would if you were to go and buy your own property and sit on it. So I think that's probably one of the most important things is if you are thinking about partnering with a developer, but you're scared to take that next step, just do your research, because I can tell you now there are developers out there that 110% do the right thing. I know that the development industry has been tainted substantially because there's a lot of people that don't do the right thing, but there are still good developers out there. You just have to find them and stick with them.
I think that too, the other thing is that, I mean, you touched on a position of control there, Remo, but in reality, a buy and hold, you still have to be pretty targeted with it. I mean, we're very targeted for our clients when we buy and hold. We use a whole bunch of data, and we use cycle data, local data, and a bunch of other stuff to come up with some areas and some actions that need to happen that's specific to that client. Because most people, the only choices they have once they buy a property is hold or sell. So it's like, it's the difference, right, between driving a Dodgem car on an enclosed circuit and like a truck, right? A big manual truck that you can go wherever you want, you can load whatever you want. Development is the truck, and Dodgem car is the buy and hold, where you got stop and go, and you're being thrown around in the market no matter what. You got a lot more control when you're out on the open road. You're changing your own gears. You can take stuff. You can not take stuff. You got your choices, right? And a lot of time that property, because a lot of it is crap that people buy, is just Dodgem car property, and the only choice they've got to ever do is to stop and resell.
Yeah.
And as CEO, we've got a fan here.
Shane's here with us. How you doing,
Shane's
Shane?
here with us. Yeah, g'day. Big shout out to Shane. I mean, we should get him on. He could sing us a song. He's got his guitar there happening, which is pretty good. But you're his reflection. I'm looking there it's actually, I can see that. I can see. Is it Shane or CO talking? I'm trying to see that now.
I wish I could play the guitar, but so Shane, and for the other viewers out there, I'd love to hear what your questions are. Shane, you mentioned earlier that buy and hold is part of your plan, and that we're reflecting part of your situation as opposed to your active strategies. I'd love to hear what your active strategies are and what you're considering, and especially for other viewers out there, let us know your questions. If you're watching this on the replay, drop your questions into the comments below. We'll be sharing more content in the weeks to come. So would love to hear from you.
Yeah, that's good. Well, look, I mean, I kind of said all I needed to say, and Remo, he never's finished saying what he needs to say. So, CEO, we're going to let you ask us any final questions or close it down, because we don't want to bore people forever.
Yeah, awesome. So, final question, and I really want to get your perspectives on this. It seems that it is predominantly using active strategies like partnering in property developments to gain capital, but also parking that in buy and hold strategies. So, for probably the last question I'd ask is who are these strategies for? So for the average Australian earning above 70K per annum, obviously if they're earning more than that, they've got access to capital quicker. But for the viewers out there that are considering active strategies or may not be aware of it, what is the plan for them to gain financial security in the next 10 years? You mentioned a few so far, but if there's anything else you can add to that, maybe we might have some questions come through in the meantime.
Yeah, all right. Well, do you want to go or you want me to go, Remo?
No, you go. I'm excited to listen.
Excited to listen. Okay, so one of the things, the main thing we use to answer that question, CO, for our clients is something called impact, and that is our impact investing strategy. So it's investing money, so IM, from projects, P, and active capital transactions is the ACT. So that means that you're taking your profits, right? So you're investing your profits from the active capital transactions, and that's the part that you invest, right? So you retain your capital and you cycle it around and you let your capital earn more money, and then that profits, they're the things that you invest. And investing is that buy and hold component, right? So we're as I said, we're not against buy and hold, but we're against people constantly using debt to do it and not having an active strategy that goes alongside it. So in my opinion, the quickest way for someone to get ahead over the next 10 years is to make your money work for you hard, and that will change in market to market. You pay down your personal home loan debt and then start investing with those profits that you're using from your capital into buy and hold, right? Because that's going to give you a stable footprint and an active transaction in the market as well. So that would be what I think is the way forward. And that's going to the amount of that and what you do and how much you spend and all that is going to differ person to person. Even possibly the locations might differ. But that would be what I'd suggest for the 10 years.
Perfect, Scotty. I think that sums it up. So for the viewers out there, again, leave your comments in the comment box below, and we'll be joining you next week, Tuesday, same time, Scotty?
Yes, mate. Yeah. Well, it's the start of the week, so we've got to kick off something well on a Tuesday lunchtime, don't we?
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Cheers,
well, I don't
Remo.
know why everyone thinks that's so funny. Why is that so funny? I mean, it's is that what? Do people actually work Mondays? I didn't know if people work Mondays. Do they?
Scotty, do you work on a Monday?
Mate,
Considering the day we
Mondays,
had yesterday, did we work on Monday?
Yeah, Mondays are like the worst day of the week. I'm really happy when Tuesday comes and I get to come on the show because I'm glad when Monday's over. So all jokes aside.
Yeah.
Guys, thank you. Thanks for joining us, everyone. And as CO said, we'll see you next week, Over and out.